So the graphics card market has been pretty boring. But if you thought of one thing that could change it up, what if they actually were good value? Well, that's what we're starting to see. There's actually been a lot of price cuts recently. Things are shifting pretty dramatically, maybe to the buildup of new GPUs later in the year, but I'm gonna put my money on it. I don't think we're gonna get insane value GPUs by the end of the year. They might be a little bit better than the ones we have right now, but these are starting to look pretty good. That's why we need to check out every single graphics card price, go over them to find the best deals on the new market and the used market. Let's freaking jump in. As with a lot of these videos, the first thing that we need to do is the annual destroying the RTX 3050. So this is Nvidia's basically bottom tier option. It's a 30 series card and they're on 40 series right now, but they're still keeping this guy around. And the 3050 really isn't that good of value right now. It's sitting at about $200. There is a 6GB version of this card, and unless you're on an extreme budget or you have a very low power computer that needs like the space requirements, I really wouldn't even look at the 6GB one. It is a lot slower than the 8GB one. I don't even recommend the 8GB one, so why would I recommend the 6GB one? Basically, if you're on the extreme budget on the new cards, these really haven't been super exciting for a while, but there is some options. RX 6600, and it's going for about $190 right now. Now this is an AMD card, it's 8GB card. It will do very well at 1080p. I have this card, I've tested it. Basically high settings, expect like 60 FPS or more, and sometimes using some upscaling, you can get up to 1440p. It can be a pretty darn good value for what it is. There is one other one that is kind of interesting. So the Intel Arc A750. Now, if you're willing to take a risk, and I don't know if I'd recommend this as much to people who, if you're getting a budget card, this might be all you have. So I don't know, but Intel has been improving their drivers a lot. Like Intel Arc GPUs are like so much better than they were before, but they're still not even as reliable as AMD drivers on their cards. Yes, Intel is actually offering pretty good value. I want to actually go back and test these cards against each other to see which ones are offering better value now, since the A750 is getting more consistent. But technically, like on paper, the A750 is a faster card than a 6600. It just does that live up to it. The A750 can be a good deal if you're willing to take a risk, but I think for the vast majority of people, I'm going to be recommending the 6600. That's been my recommendation for a while. Both of these cards completely outclass the 3050. But if you really are on an extreme budget, the new market really isn't really for you on like under $200, okay? I would recommend going on the used market. And there are some pretty good deals right now. So the RX 5700 XT, this is actually faster than an RX 6600, faster than a 3050, faster than all those cards, and you can get it for $130 used right now. These were going up in price because I think people were buying all of them, but now these are starting to come back down. They are a pretty darn good deal at $130, $150. I mean, this card can basically max out games at 1080p, like ultra settings, except it doesn't have ray tracing. Just know that this is a card from 2019 at this point. Even on a card at this price point, I wouldn't expect to be ray tracing anyways. And it can dabble in some 1440p gaming too. Like definitely, I have one of these cards. It is a pretty good performer, but it is on AMD. And you might not want AMD for any like reason. I'm not gonna judge you, okay? You might not want it for like upscaling or something because Nvidia has DLSS. Now, if you want to get an Nvidia card, I'd say the best one in the used market is probably the RTX 2060 Super. Now, this card is about the exact same speed as the 5700 XT. It is costing a little bit more on the used market, but you do get things like Nvidia's DLSS, which is pretty good, especially on a card that isn't as fast. Then you can upscale to make up some of that performance gap. DLSS, super nice. This card technically can do ray tracing, but I don't think you're going to be doing that much ray tracing on it. So I wouldn't even gauge that feature that much. You might want to use NVIDIA for any other things on your computer. Like NVIDIA is generally speaking better supported in a lot of different apps. So if you want NVIDIA GPU for that, just paying another 10, 20 bucks for a 2060 Super might be a good investment on the used side. And if you are willing to go jump up a little bit more on the used market, I'd say the 2070 Super is a pretty good card at like $180 right now. So here's the 2060 Super on Tech Power Up. We can check this out compared to the 2070 Super. It says here, and this is just a general comparison here, hide my face cam, the 2070 Super is about 15% faster, for, what is that, another like 180. So is that 15% more money? It's pretty much even scaling or so. It's also an 8GB graphics card. But yeah, this is a decent deal on the used market as well. We're gonna hop back over to the new side and check out what's around a little bit above $200 right now. Nvidia doesn't really have an option around the low $200 mark. That has been the RTX 3050 8GB model that's been sitting usually at like $230. You see, this is more the typical price over here. But Nvidia doesn't have another card around this price point. Now, this is a card from AMD that I've bashed on quite a bit, the RX 7600. Now, this card is decently fast. It's quite a bit faster than the 6600. And if you do have the money to jump up another, what, that's like 45 bucks, I would jump up to the 7600. You get quite a bit more performance for that price. Now, the reason I haven't really recommended the RX 7600 all that often is because of another card that AMD does offer that's about the same card. So the RX 6650 XT has been on this thing. It's like AMD offers this card and it's $230. And if you compare these, you know, just straight up to against each other, the 7600 right here at 64 FPS, 6650 XT is 59 FPS. So these cards are really similar. It'd be like, oh, why would you buy it? Because the 7600 in history has been costing around $250. So if you can get the 7600 for the same price as a 6650 XT, I would get it. The only advantage that I've basically told people between these cards, they're about the same speed. If you need an AV1 video encoder, if you're a person who works on content and you want that encoder, which is a more efficient video encoder on your graphics card, I don't think it's even that necessary because you can just use another one that's also very efficient called H.265, but I'm not going to get into the weeds of that right now. Basically, the 7600 has another video encoder that is pretty good on it. But other than that, like in terms of the speed of the cards and the power efficiency, like the 7600, the 6650 XT, you know, they're about the same performance and they're within like a watt of each other. So it doesn't really matter that much which one you get. Though if you want to get a little bit more future proofing, there's going to be more driver updates for a 7600 most likely into the future. But yeah, this is starting to look like a decent deal now. Now, if you did notice, something I want to point out, and this seems to be a pretty regular occurrence on the GPU market, at least on the AMD side, I've been seeing this quite a bit. So you might see a 6650 XT. Wow, that looks like such a good deal at $160. That is a steal. That is, wow, that is such a deal. But I just want to tell you that this is not the deal that you hope it is. Guys, I don't know what's been going on with AMD's distribution of cards and stuff, but it kind of worries me. Because if you hop over to Amazon, which it's like, oh, it's officially here. XFX is the company that makes this version of the card. And I've actually bought an RX 6600 that is just like this one from XFX before. So it's a pretty decent card. You can even see here that says the XFX store. And you can see that this has 10,560 ratings. So this looks completely legit. But when you dig just a little bit deeper, this is a little weird because usually on Amazon that you'll see it's like sold and shipped by Amazon.com if it is from an official retailer. And I don't know what would happen if you buy a card like this. I have no clue, and I don't recommend getting it because maybe you would get the card. I don't know, but I sincerely doubt it. And the thing about it is if you try to return this card to Amazon, they're probably like, hey, you sent us the wrong card, but you're gonna have to fight. You're gonna be fighting this to return the card if this is a scam. So I'd really not recommend doing it. Just keep your eye out for this kind of stuff. If there is a deal on here that looks too good to be true, guess what? It's probably too good to be true. But you know what? Some deals that feel like they are too good to be true is the used market. Okay. Now, if you go to this, you know, just like low $200 price bracket or so. Now, I don't exactly recommend getting the RTX 3060. What I do recommend getting is actually it's a little bit older brother. Not older brother, it's not older. The bigger brother, okay? The 12 what? That's a weird card. That's weird. You can get an RTX 3060 Ti for $220 right now. The 7600 is right here at 88 FPS and the 3060 Ti is at 102. So it's a good bit faster than these cards, and you remember it's going for the same price. The RTX 3060 Ti, I mean, it has 8 GB of VRAM. You are gonna have to tinker with that kind of stuff, but I mean, at $220, like, I'm willing to deal with 8 gigabytes of VRAM for $220. This is a pretty solid deal right now. It's very fast. It's gonna crush anything at 1080p, like ultra settings, maybe not with ray tracing, but it can do a lot at 1080p, and this is a capable 1440p graphics card. And that would be my main recommendations on the used market here, probably just 3060 Ti. Now, if you do want to get over that VRAM problem, you can get the RTX 3060 on the used market. Now, this card it has 12 gigabytes of VRAM, but it is a good bit slower than the 3060 Ti. It's not insanely slower, but there's a decent gap there. So I think I would personally go for the more performance on the 3060 Ti rather than costing about the same money for a 3060 with 12 gigabytes of VRAM on the used market. But that is up to you. If you want to get around VRAM, if you need more VRAM for anything else you might be doing on your system, like say you're using video editing or you're doing like 3D modeling work or something, you need some more VRAM on your card, maybe the 3060 would be a better option for you in general. Now let's jump up to the $300 price point on the new market. This starts to get pretty interesting. There's actually a lot of options here. Now, if you're talking about, we just talked about a 3060 on the used market. You can get a 3060 on the new market, all right? And this is about $285. Now, I don't recommend this card. If you want to go NVIDIA at $300, I would be getting the RTX 4060. Because I've tested both of these cards against each other. I would prefer tinkering around with 8 gigabytes of VRAM on the 4060 rather than getting the 12 gigabytes that's on the 3060. Now, it does suck that for some reason, NVIDIA did downgrade the VRAM from 30 series to 40 series, the 60 card. They just did that. I don't know why they went backwards. I mean, we kind of know because this was probably actually a 4050. And that it could only do 8 gigabytes of VRAM. Come on, I mean, it sucks. So I wish they didn't downgrade the VRAM, but I would rather fuss with 8 gigabytes. And generally speaking, the 4060 is about 10 to 15% faster than the 3060. And if they're both at the same price on the new market, you just want to go new, I would be getting the 4060. And it is also quite a bit more power efficient on the 4060. It isn't absolutely insane, but I mean, this card sips power. It's like just over 100 watts. It is chilling. You get access to DLSS frame generation, all that stuff because of a 40 series graphics card. There is other options with frame generation. If you do want to still go with the 3060, you could be using FSR3 frame generation, or I just did a recent video on lossless scaling and that app that uses frame generation as well. So if you want to check out that video as well. DLSS frame generation, I don't think has that edge that like DLSS upscaling has. Like DLSS upscaling is huge. If you don't really care about the upscaling that much, at $300, there is an insane deal right now. And that is AMD's 6750 XT. Now there is only one version of this card available right now, but it's $300, which is insane. So if we look at this compared here, the 6750 XT is usually about 5 to 10% faster than the 6700 XT. And that card here at 1080p is getting 105 FPS. So the 6750 XT, it'd be getting about 110 to 115 FPS here. And you just see it compared here for the 4060. That would be, if it's 110 or so, that'd be 20 more FPS than the 4060. That's a pretty big performance jump. So if you're not that concerned about DLSS upscaling and stuff, DLSS does look better on NVIDIA, and the 6750 XT is only gonna have access to AMD's FSR and Intel's XeSS, but it does take a performance hit going on Intel's XeSS, but XeSS does look quite good. You know, compared to, we were just talking about on the 4060 how it has VRAM problems. You're gonna have to be tinkering with 8 gigabytes of VRAM, and that does kind of suck. It might not end up being that limiting to you, but you're gonna have to tinker with settings, and I would be a little bit fearful of how this card is going to age, as games in the future are probably going to require more and more VRAM. But the 6750 XT is an absolute banger of a card. I'm literally on the edge of getting one of these for myself, because 12 gigabytes of VRAM at this price point, $300, and it's so much faster. Just by this 6750 XT would be like 110 FPS. It is pretty damn good deal at $300, and I don't think there's another competition that really stacks up that closely to it. Now, even at $325, it's still worth considering. This card could be your entry point into 1440p gaming. The only downside that I even talked to the Discord, and some people in the Discord were like, oh, the 6750 XT isn't that efficient. And I don't think they're exactly wrong. The 6700 XT on this one, which is actually Hitman 3 power consumption, for the total system is 341 watts. That means the card is probably around 250 watts, 220 watts or so. And if we just look up here, there isn't a 4060 on here, but a 4060 Ti, which would draw more power than a 4060, it's at 273 watts. So if power does cost quite a bit in your area, then the 6750 XT will end up costing probably more. Like, it already costs more in general in the 4060. It's gonna cost even more into the future, which does kind of suck. I don't think at this price point that ray tracing is really a huge concern. Unless you're using ray tracing for other work like 3D modeling or something, you need that ray tracing performance to speed things up, then maybe Nvidia could still be worth it at that point. And I do have benchmarks of the 4060 in Blender, and it does actually do quite well. One thing, if you are concerned about the upscaling, like not having DLSS on the AMD card, well, AMD did say, and let me scroll up here a little bit, that FSR 3.1 is supposed to be coming out. They say it here somewhere, I don't know exactly where it is, but they say that's supposed to be coming out in Q2 of 2024. And I'm just saying, Q2 is about to be over. That's at the end of June. No, I don't think it's coming out yet. And even at that point, it's only supposed to come out in Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, which is only one game. AMD does claim that there's gonna be pretty big like image quality improvements with FSR 3.1 that could maybe get it to a level pretty close to Nvidia's DLSS. I can't guarantee this. And if you do want to place your bets on AMD's upscaling, you know, competing more with DLSS, you can place your bets on it. But if I'm being honest here, you're probably going to buy a product that you can actually get. You should pay for what is there now, not what is promised in the future. And Nvidia's upscaler right now is quite a bit better. Even if FSR 3.1 does come out relatively soon, it's going to take it quite a while to get into games. You're going to still probably see a lot of games even released with FSR 2 instead of FSR 3.1 for quite a while. Now, the other AMD graphics cards that are in this area, pretty much one other option. AMD is so weird because they have these cards like so close to each other in price, and they're both new right now, but you can get an RX 7600 XT for $300. I don't really recommend this over the 6750 XT, mainly for one reason, and that's because it is quite a bit slower. So if we go here, let's go to 1440p from Hardware Unbox here with their data. Great data, so obviously check out all the stuff, all links to all the data for everything that I show in this. It's gonna be a lot of links down there, but it'll all be down there. Basically, the 7600 is here at 67 FPS, and then the 6700 XT is at 76 FPS, okay? The 6750 XT would probably be up around 80, maybe a little over 80 FPS. And these cards at the same price, they both have more than 8 gigabytes of VRAM, so you're probably not going to be fighting a VRAM because the 7600 XT has 16 gigabytes. But the 6750 XT, it's going to be quite a bit faster than the 7600 XT, and if they're both at the same price, man, I really just don't know why you get the 7600 XT. Downside about the 6750 XT would probably be the power consumption. It's probably quite a bit more, but if you're after just raw performance, the 6750 XT is going to be quite a bit faster, probably noticeably faster, and that means it's probably going to last longer into the future, and 12 gigabytes of VRAM is pretty nice, okay? Now, I just want to like mention another card, not that I really recommend it that much, but the Intel Arc A770 is going for about $280 right now. I actually have I can go grab it. I actually have this exact specific model. Sparkles actually sent me this, but I haven't really found a reason to make a video on the Arc A770 as of lately, because they're getting better with drivers, but because their value is probably only just a little bit better while taking a risk of getting quite a bit of like driver issues or having problems. And I know when people just want to sit down and game, you don't want to be fussing with drivers, getting things to work, your display is not coming out, it doesn't work properly in a game. Sometimes Intel drivers don't work in a new game that came out very well, and then you get really screwed over. You want to play this new game, all of a sudden you can't freaking play it. Things are probably just going to get better and better into the future. It's kind of hard to recommend. Also, the Battlemage GPUs, which would be B series GPUs, are hopefully coming out this year. We don't really know. What happens if we go to the used market? Okay, at around $300. So the RTX 2080 Ti is probably the only decent option around this price point right now. So the 2080 Ti is a pretty fast card. Gonna be faster than a 3060 Ti. It's probably around the performance of a 3070 up here. So at 1440p, the 2080 Ti is probably getting about 82 FPS or so. Pretty old now, but it does still support NVIDIA's DLSS and ray tracing. This card might be fast enough to do some ray tracing in games, so it's something to consider. But the big thing with this card is it actually has 11 gigabytes of VRAM. 11 gigabytes, that's pretty nice. I mean, like, usually I think this card would never be limited by its VRAM to any significant degree. Like, I don't think it's gonna, that's holding it back. It probably is more the performance that holds it back. The 2080 Ti can definitely be a pretty solid option and something I'm considering picking up and just testing to see how this card ages, because this was the first card to have Tensor cores on it, the AI processing cores, all that. Let's go ahead and jump up to the next price bracket. All right, boys. Okay, so this is going to be getting to around $400. NVIDIA has some pretty embarrassing options here, though they're starting to look better. RTX 4060 Ti is about $365 right now. And if we look at it in terms of performance, it is quite a bit faster than those other options. It's apparently faster than a 7600 XT, going to 79 FPS from 67. So it's quite a bit faster. This is about on the same level as a 2080 Ti, which we just talked about in the used market, but this does cost freaking $365. When you pay this much, you're only getting 8 gigabytes of VRAM, which I think cards around $300, maybe below $300, I'm worth considering. Like, working with the VRAM, it's like, 8 gigabytes sucks, but you know, you can kind of tinker with some settings to get it to work and all that stuff. But the 4060 Ti, like, you're paying too much to get 8 gigabytes of VRAM. I find it pretty ridiculous. The only thing, like, if NVIDIA wants to drop the price of this card, they can't drop it past the 4060. So I think this card needs to cost $300 just because of the 8 gigabytes. And the 4060 would have to get shot down a lot. And I just don't think NVIDIA is going to do that. But AMD has some pretty compelling options in this right now, okay? So the 7700 XT, again, this first one up here that says $300. This is another scam. Okay, we go here to Amazon and it's that same company. So right now XFX is getting scammed right now. So keep your eye out for that. If a deal seems too good to be true, it probably is. But the 7700 XT, this card launched at $450. And at that price point, it just wasn't that interesting. But now it's come down $75 from where it was. It's at $375 right now. And if you want to compare this versus a 4060 Ti, I cannot recommend the 4060 Ti. We compare their performance. So this is just hand over fist faster, and if we look at the VRAM, it has 12 gigabytes of VRAM compared to 8 gigabytes on the 4060 Ti. 7700 XT at 77 FPS during ray tracing here from Hardware Unboxed. Surprisingly close to the 4060 Ti. Like, the 4060 Ti is actually slower in this case. A lot of times the 7700 XT, just because of its raw performance, is beating out the 4060 Ti. Even in Cyberpunk, probably because of the ray tracing and stuff, being the VRAM upping with the ray tracing. The only real downside to getting the 7700 XT, first up, would be the power efficiency. So the 4060 Ti here is at 273 watts, and we go here to the 7700 XT. Well, the 7700 XT, generally speaking, sits around where RX 6800 is. It's about 365 watts, so it is faster. So the power does justify some stuff, but I don't think it entirely justifies going from 273 watts to about 365 watts. It's almost a 100 watt difference versus the 4060 Ti. You are playing at 1440p. You probably want to upscale a little bit more, like using quality upscaling. Having only access to FSR and XeSS isn't as compelling of options compared to the NVIDIA option of DLSS, but just the raw performance of this card might just make up for it, and then the VRAM just gives it more security into the future that it's probably going to be fine with 12. But if 12 gigabytes, you're like, I'm going to need more than 12 gigabytes. Well, there is one option on the new market here. At times, I don't know when this card is going to sell out. It keeps persisting, but there is an RX 6800. There's one available. This one's a scam at $270, but the RX 6800 is $360 right now. So it's actually less than the 7700 XT. It has 16 gigabytes of VRAM. And this is where you start to make a decision, because if you compare them in performance, the RX 6800 is actually a little bit faster than the 7700 XT. It has more VRAM. In terms of power efficiency, they're about the same. There isn't that compelling of an option to go for the 7700 XT when the 6800 exists. Only reason is the RX 6800 won't have AI cores on it, as far as I know. Not that that's that important, because AMD is yet to utilize the AI cores on their GPUs, but if that does start to become more useful into the future, the 6800 I don't think has any AI cores on it, and if it does, there's probably less of them, and they might not even be able to run a lot of stuff that you might need those AI cores to run. And then there's the other thing, like if we go above $400, oh, I talked about that whole time with the RTX 4060 Ti that only has 8 gigabytes of VRAM, and that kind of sucks. NVIDIA did make a 16 gigabyte version of this card, but it costs $450. Guys, this is like $90 more than the other 8 gigabyte 4060 Ti. It's the same card, paying almost $90 more. And if you compare these, unless VRAM is an issue in your game, $90 for the same performance. Like, see, 81 FPS versus 79. The only major thing here in terms of performance is the 1% lows. So because the 4060 Ti 8 gigabyte at 1440p here, it doesn't have as much VRAM, the 1% lows. So your games are probably more stuttery on the 8 gigabyte card. But would you pay $90 to relieve some stuttering, or would you rather just tinker with some settings to make the stuttering go away? It's weird. But if we dropped down to 1080p where you don't use it as much VRAM, 115 FPS, 111, they're basically the same card, pretty much indistinguishable. And because VRAM isn't as much of a problem here, the 1% lows at 95 and 89 are pretty much the same too, so I wouldn't get too fussed about the stuttering at 1080p. Though I don't think you'd be buying a $400 graphics card to play at freaking 1080p. I just don't really recommend the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte, which does suck, because if you want NVIDIA, unless you go on the used market for under $500, NVIDIA does not really have any options available to you. The only thing with the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte is if you're working on AI applications, apparently you need 16 gigabytes of VRAM to do that typically. And then this is the first NVIDIA graphics card that offers 16 gigabytes of VRAM. It isn't exciting to me, but if you need it, it's a very specialized card. Cool, have fun with it. But the 7700 XT is such a better option. And then that kind of leads us to the used marketplace here around $400, because there is some solid options. So the RX 6800, I just wanted to mention this beforehand before we jump into the other cards here. This isn't $400, but we mentioned the 6800 versus the 7700 XT. I don't think this is that good of a deal on the used market, because we just saw it cost $360 on the new market. I don't know why you'd only pay $30 less to get it used, just buy the new one. It doesn't make any sense on the used market. It's been like this for a while. The RX 6800 XT is a really good option right now. Like, this is a juicy deal on the used market. So 1440p, according to Hardware Unboxed here, here's the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte at 71 FPS, 6800 XT at 94 FPS at 1440p, as well as compared to the 7700 XT. 6800 XT is 94, 7700 XT is at 83. I mean, this card is quite a bit faster than that other competition that's around $400. And look at the 6800 XT, it's going for like $370. It's like the same price of those cards, but it is faster. It has 16 gigabytes of VRAM. The 7700 XT has 12. Definitely worth considering going with the 6800 XT. Is looking juicy. It is looking juicy. Now, if you want to go NVIDIA on the used market to get DLSS, better ray tracing support, but the RTX 3080, if you want to go NVIDIA, damn good option too on the used market. I mean, there's one listing here going for, what is that? Like $370 or so right now. They seem to be around $370, $380. This is a very fast card. I mean, this card is very capable at 1080p, 1440p. This and the 6800 XT, I mean, they go neck and neck. They trade blows. I have comparisons of these. These cards are very, very close. The only, like, the thing with the NVIDIA card is you get DLSS support. It is better at ray tracing than the 6800 XT. The only problem is the 10 gigabytes of VRAM. 10 gigabytes is probably at a point where at 1440p with how fast this card is, that you might run into issues pretty consistently because it is fast enough to max out games at 1440p, even dabble in some ray tracing, and ray tracing uses more VRAM. That is probably the most limiting factor of this card. Now, they do offer a 12 gigabyte version of this card, but I just don't think it's worth the price increase on the used market. But it has DLSS support and it has ray tracing. It's debatable. Do you want to get the 16 gigabytes of VRAM on the 6800 XT to ensure more longevity, or do you want to get the feature comparison on the RTX 3080? I will tell you for myself, DLSS support, I mean, I have both of these cards. DLSS support is really, really good. I love DLSS. It is a great technology for upscaling. This doesn't support frame generation from DLSS, but that's a different story. The 800 XT, it actually draws less power on the AMD card here too as well. So, I mean, this is like a hungry card, and it will kick out some heat and that kind of stuff. It draws a lot of power. But me personally, I'd be leaning more towards the 3080 over the 6800 XT just because of the features. I mean, features are nice, man. They really are. If you're after raw performance, just rasterized performance in games, you're playing competitive games, you're playing maybe some more graphically intensive games, but you're not interested in ray tracing, then the 6800 XT could be a really good option for you. But it's toss up. These cards are close. Let's go ahead and jump into probably the most exciting price bracket, which kind of sucks because it costs quite a bit of money. I mean, guys, we're entering territory at $500 that costs as much as a PS5. So these GPUs, like, these aren't cheap, but they are very fast and they're very capable at 1440p. The first one we're going to look at here is the 7800 XT from AMD. Now, we just talked about the 6800 XT, and the 7800 XT is very similar. I have both of these cards. The 7800 XT is usually about 5 to 10% faster and is better at ray tracing, generally speaking. It also draws less power, but it isn't like leaps and bounds better than the 6800 XT. Like, if you have a 6800 XT, you have no reason to get a 7800 XT. This card right now is only $470. Now, this card initially MSRP'd for $500, which was already a good deal when it came out. It's been very solid ever since it launched. As 16 gigabytes of VRAM. It's very capable at 1440p. Is a fast card. Yeah, you can, generally speaking, get them for under $500 right now, like almost every model. Now, what is this competing with from NVIDIA? Well, this is NVIDIA's first graphics card that might actually make some sense. Is the RTX 4070. This is where the conversation gets really interesting. $530, $535, whatever, quite a bit more. I mean, that's like $60, almost $70 more. I'm not sure if it's worth the price difference. Now, the RX 7800 XT is quite a bit faster than the 4070, like pretty significantly faster. And we're talking like about 10 to 15% faster, maybe even 20% faster in quite a few games if you're just talking about rasterized performance. It is cheaper, so that's a huge thing. It also has more VRAM. So the 7800 XT has 16 gigabytes and the 4070 has 12 gigabytes. So if you're going to be playing at 1440p, you want your card to last longer into the future, the 7800 XT with more VRAM, both of them are completely fine right now, but the 7800 XT with 16 gigabytes is probably going to last longer into the future. Now, what do you get with the 4070? Well, you're starting to get into this price bracket where the extra features start to matter a lot. Like paying $500 or so on a GPU and you don't get DLSS, that kind of sucks. Okay, like it starts to get to that point where, like, even though it is slower, I kind of want DLSS, because if I want to use upscaling in a game, even on the 7800 XT, FSR just doesn't look as good, and I don't know when it's going to look even close to as good. Are you going to downgrade your VRAM and pay more for DLSS? Maybe. because DLSS is really damn good. Then also the 4070, just like the RTX 3080 is on the used market, is getting fast enough to take advantage of ray tracing in games. Like, I wouldn't really care about it on anything really below this from Nvidia, but this card is fast enough to start using some ray tracing. Compare these two. If you're talking about light ray tracing titles for AMD, it can hold up. But if you're talking about any heavier ray tracing titles, then the 7800 XT is going to struggle a little bit in those type of games. It's kind of unsure into the future how heavy games are going to be with ray tracing. Is this going to be like a deciding factor? Because obviously ray tracing has been around since 2018, but we're only just seeing games that take really full advantage of it. It depends if the 4070 and its ray tracing ability is going to be as important than the 7800 XT, but it could be a huge thing, and the 7800 XT might not be able to take advantage of it. So it's really a toss up. It depends more on the type of games that you're playing. Both these cards are great at 1440p. They're still fast. 7800 XT is generally speaking quite a bit faster, but they're both really fast. So they're going to be happy with either one most of the time, unless you're really on the bleeding edge. It's hard to recommend one of these cards over the other one. If you're less interested in ray tracing, if you don't plan on upscaling your games, then the 7800 XT is a great option. But if you do feel like you might be missing out, then it might be worth paying, it's a lot more, to get the 4070 just at the opportunity cost. It's like, do you want to buy something with less features when you're already paying this much? It puts you in a weird spot. Though I think the 7800 XT is presenting a great value proposition. But then we start to move up a little bit because, you know, a more direct comparison, it's kind of like the 7800 XT is sitting in a league of its own right now, because the actual competitor, like price to price, 4070 is actually more the RX 7900 GRE, which is the Golden Rabbit edition. And this card, I think the name is so like on the nose, it's stupid. $530 or $540. This card actually came to the wider market relatively recently, a few months ago, and it came in at $550, and it's dropped a little bit in price since. And this card, I mean, we thought the 7800 XT was faster. The 7900 GRE is even faster than that. I don't have one of these to directly, you know, test for the same price. And the 7900 GRE also has 16 gigabytes of VRAM. If you're after raw performance, the GRE price to price is gonna be better for you than the 4070. The only thing with the 7900 GRE that it's hard for me to justify is actually it versus AMD's own competition. The 7800 XT is, you know, as we see, pretty much neck and neck. They both have 16 gigabytes of VRAM. They're both AMD cards. I think you pay for what you get, generally speaking, maybe a little bit less price to performance value, but it's still a decent option. This is where things start to get a little funky, because when the 7900 GRE came out, it was actually at $550, right? And that was more actually to compete with the $600. We're gonna jump up in price point here. The $600 RTX 4070 Super. Now I do have this card to test, I just don't have the GRE to test it against. But the 4070 Super has come down in price a little bit. This card started at $600, and it is now about $585 or so. I mean, this card is a pretty fast card when it comes down to it. Pretty good jump between those NVIDIA cards for $600 versus, you know, $530. So the 4070 Super makes quite a bit of sense. It is faster than the 7900 GRE. And in terms of the pricing, I mean, it's competitive versus the 7900 GRE, because this is $585 right now. And then the 4070 Super also has, you know, all the ray tracing support, DLSS, frame generation, and all that stuff. That it's a pretty compelling option at $600 or a little bit below it now. The only main problem with this 4070 Super is 12 gigabytes of VRAM. This is a 1440p graphics card. I mean, maybe every now and then you could dabble at 4K. It's fine right now, but I'm a little bit worried about how this card will age into the future, because 12 gigabytes is kind of pushing it for how much performance this card can put out. It's not limiting it at the moment, probably won't limit it for a couple years, maybe even 3 to 4 years, but we're starting to see some games creep up to 12 gigabytes at 1440p that it might be an issue. That's the only downside about this card. I think it's a great value. Other than that, probably NVIDIA's best value card out there. Now, in terms of the used market, there isn't really anything around this price point. I mean, that I thought it was really that good on the used market, so I wouldn't even consider it that heavily. If we jump up on the new market, we're going to around $600 to $800. I think is the next price point that makes the most sense. There's only two options for cards, and that is AMD's 7900 XT at around $690, but generally speaking around $700 right now is the 7900 XT, and then the 4070 Ti Super. Card started at $800, and we're seeing at least one listing right now from PNY, $770. I thought this card wouldn't budge that much in price, but it has budged a little bit. This gets interesting because this starts to get into that price point. I might even make a full video on these cards compared. The 7900 XT is super fast. It has 20 gigabytes of VRAM, which is almost a stupid amount of VRAM. This is a 4K graphics card through and through, but you know, you're making some compromises. You get to pay less than the NVIDIA graphics card, but you are missing out on DLSS. You're missing out on ray tracing. And when you are paying like $700 for a graphics card, not having those things does kind of suck. Now, in terms of performance, the 4070 Ti Super, generally speaking, is pretty comparable to the 7900 XT in rasterized performance. The 7900 XT is generally faster, not by a degree that I think most people would really care. And it starts to get to that point where the feature comparison here, you're paying this much on a card. I find it kind of hard to go with the AMD card. It would have to be significantly faster and significantly cheaper. You guys might argue that 20 gigabytes of VRAM is like necessary or something. That's a great feature. Unless you personally need that much VRAM, I don't think most people are going to be using 20 gigabytes of VRAM. It's kind of overkill. Like I think it's dope. I mean, 20 gig, that's a huge number. But I think most people would find that the 16 gigabytes on the 4070 Ti Super is going to be secure into the future. If you use this at 1440p, it's just going to be even more secure. At 4K, it might start in the biggest games, the biggest AAA games might start to have some issues, but I don't even think it's that bad either. This card is a good deal, and I kind of hate to say it because it costs so much, and I hate that this card is named a 4070 Ti Super because just last generation, a 3080, even though it never really went for this price, a 3080 cost $700. But all of a sudden, now a 70 Ti class costed $800 at launch, and the prices have just, I can't deny that is a good deal. I just hate that the naming conventions kind of suck right now. I don't know if I can recommend the 7900 XT over the 4070 Ti Super. It just starts to cost too much. I don't know what AMD is going to do on the high end. Obviously, next generation, it's from all the rumors, they said they've been taking a break from the high-end GPU market because I don't know how they're going to add value up here. And that leads us up into the next price bracket. So we go $800 to $1,000. These are some expensive graphics cards. AMD has an offering, the 7900 XTX. And ever since this kind of launched, I just don't think people have been talking about this card that much because it just doesn't seem that enticing, especially since the super graphics cards came out from NVIDIA around January this year. The 7900 XTX just doesn't feel like a very good option. It's going for $920 right now, up against NVIDIA's RTX 4080 or 4080 Super. The original 4080 costed $1,200 at launch. So we went from a 3080 at $700, and in one generation, the 4080 went up to $1,200. But the 4080 Super, basically it's the same card, but it launched at $1,000 instead of $1,200. They basically just did an official price cut on the 4080. This card can now be found, it's dropped down in price, the PNY version. I don't know if this is a good model of the card or what, but there is one listing available that is at $964 right now. And if you compare it to the 7900 XTX, that's at $920 right now. And if you compare those two in performance, now I don't have a 7900 XTX, I do have a 4080 Super, but I don't have the XTX. And I want to test with that card, but I have to buy it. And dude, I'm finding it so hard to justify paying like $900 or something for a GPU to test in a video. Oh man, it sounds so expensive. But in rasterization, so a lot of people might want to argue that the 7900 XTX is going to be a lot faster in rasterization. and then the NVIDIA's cards are going to be faster in ray tracing. But in terms of rasterization, they're pretty close to each other. And then NVIDIA's card is just faster at ray tracing. To me, it starts to make you wonder why you get the 7900 XT when there's only a $40 difference. And then the NVIDIA card also has DLSS and all that stuff. It has the feature advantage. It's also more power efficient. Ever since NVIDIA released the 4080 Super, I've seen very, very little reason to get the 7900 XTX. It used to be when this 4080 cost $1,200 and the 7900 XTX was at $900 or something like that. That was a $300 price difference. That might get the old noodle cooking up in there. But ever since this card released, it's basically made the 7900 XTX kind of pointless. And then really, if your pockets are just infinite, first off, if you have infinite pockets, I have a cat here now, you can give some of that to me. I mean, why you even watch this video? I don't even get it. But the 4090 definitely costs money. Like that is definitely some money there. It's just kind of funny to talk about the prices on the 4090. It has actually come down in price, which is kind of wild. It was for a while at $2,000. It started to work down a little bit. There's been this whole situation with the 4090s in China and everything. You know, if you're really after that bleeding edge performance, later this year, at least rumors at this point in time are pointing towards a 5090 coming out this year. If your card is good enough, which I'm assuming if you have 4090 money, then it probably is, then I find it kind of hard to justify not at least waiting for the 5090 to come out and seeing if these at least go down in price, even though you might not care about money. But the 5090 is probably going to be a similar price while maybe being significantly faster. We don't really know what the performance is going to be like right now. So I hope this helped. This is a pricing update for GPUs. Obviously, we've had some things change a little bit. Like cards have gotten some good deals. Some standout deals to me at $300. The 6750 XT is a banger. Then the 7700 XT is also pretty solid at like $375 for the 4070 Super. The 7800 XT, standout deals. It sucks that they cost so much money, but they're good deals. The only thing that really sucks about the market right now is under $300 GPUs just really aren't that compelling. 7600 has dropped in price and it does look pretty decent at that price point. And if you're interested in getting any of these cards, there will be affiliate links in the description. That's it for the pricing. I just wanted to talk about a little bit here because you obviously probably see that my setup has changed a little bit. This is a Rode NT1 microphone. I've actually had this microphone in my closet for a while and I actually busted it out and was like, hey, what does it sound against this mic that I normally use, which is the Shure MV7. If you know anything about microphones, this is a dynamic microphone and then this is a condenser microphone. Whatever, you don't know what that is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't tell me if it sounds good, basically. That's all I want to ask because I like the way it sounded when I pulled it out and I was like, damn, I'm gonna do that. And I also got a new mic arm, which I love this because look how clean the cable is. It just goes like whoop. And there's this little rubber grommet that just hides the cable up in here. It's badass. I love that so much. Hopefully this whole guide helped you. And that's been about it for me. I'm gonna wrap this up. Y'all have a good one and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.